What's up, Variant Nation? Welcome to another episode of Variant the Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Arris Quinones, accompanied by Tim Connolly.
What's going on?
Yeah, today we have some crazy DC news to talk about. There's been some big shakeups that went down this last week or so. Over 600 layoffs within DC Entertainment. Pretty crazy.
To say the least. Yeah, to say the least.
So there's lots to talk about there. We've actually been talking about, not this specifically, but we've been talking about shakeups on the podcast for several months now. Like, this isn't,
it's been months,
as sad and horrible as it is not shocking. And that kind of makes it sadder. But we'll dive into that in a bit. We do have a sponsor that we want to thank real quick, though.
That's right. Today's episode is brought to you guys by NordVPN. We want to thank them for sponsoring. That's actually our VPN of choice. We've been using them for a really long time. And with all of our lives becoming more and more digital all the time and an ever-increasing amount of cybercrime going on, it's never been more important to protect your online privacy. And you can start doing that right now by going to nordvpn.com/variant podcast to set up a VPN of your own with the company that we trust. NordVPN has been protecting our online activity here at Variant and Triune Films for quite a while. It's crazy simple to set up. You get up to 6 simultaneous connections with unlimited bandwidth. They've got over 5,000 remote servers worldwide to choose from, and their 24/7 customer service is second to none. But it's also a great time to jump on price-wise with the offer that NordVPN is running. So do yourself a favor and take control of your internet life. Go to nordvpn.com/variant podcast now to get 68% off a 2-year plan. And when you use the promo code variant podcast at checkout, members of the Variant Nation will get an extra month for free as a bonus on top of that. So again, get in on this amazing offer by going to nordvpn.com/variant podcast or use the code variant podcast at account sign up to get you started. You will be very glad you did.
Oh, snickety snap. Look at that.
Oh, snap.
But let's get into the big news of today, the topic of our entire podcast for the evening. And that is the layoffs, or the bloodbath, as it's being called, at DC Entertainment / Warner Brothers.
Yes.
That's what everyone's calling. Now, I will say, I actually just heard back today, because we have several contacts at DC,
right,
and whatnot.
Yep.
And I heard from one earlier today, because I reached out, because we've become friends with these people. They send us stuff to review all the time. We talked about interviews at Comic-Con and stuff. So I'm like, I need confirmation of what's going on, right? So I reached out to one of the contacts we had just to be like, I heard the news. I hope everything's I hope, it's not what they say it is, yada, yada, yada. But unfortunately, it's exactly what they say it is. So everything is true, as confirmed by, someone we know that works for DC Entertainment. So very, very unfortunate. Now, I will say a lot of people are not sure, like, when this is happening and stuff like that. I will say that the contact that I reached out to, it said it's not immediate.
Right.
It's not happening like right away. It is happening, but it's not like, DC Direct is shut down right now. Those people are currently not in their office right now. It's not like, they sent everyone home that day. It's kind of a slow I imagine it's going to happen slowly as the year rolls on towards the end of the year. But, it's still happening nonetheless. It doesn't matter if it's a month from now, 2 months from now. It's still it's going to happen. And that is unfortunate. And before, we start talking about it, intensely, I do want to let, kind of brief the audience up what's going on. So basically, I believe Sunday night, Monday morning, about a week ago, it broke on Hollywood Reporter that the majority of staff of the streaming service for DC Universe has been laid off, and about a third of their editorial has been laid off, including the entire shutdown of their in-house collectible division, DC Direct. So we're talking about massive, we're talking about Bob Harris, you know what I mean? Senior VP, sorry, Bob Harris is the editor in chief. Then we have the senior VP in publishing and strategy. Let go. We have so many. Mark Doyle, he's an executive editor there and oversaw the rollout for Black Label and all their graphic novels.
Yep.
Jim Lee has been demoted in a sense. He was currently co-publisher and chief creative officer. He is no longer co-publisher. He is now just chief creative officer. So lots of things. People like Jim Fletcher, who creative heads at DC Direct. DC Direct for me is one of the bigger ones, because there's been that's one of the only ones, or the only one, that the entire division was shut down completely. I would guess the second one would be the DC Universe streaming one.
DC Universe, yeah.
But there is still some, it's still there in some capacity. It's just they let the majority of people go because as they slowly transition into HBO Max, because that's what's going to happen in, eventually. But DC Direct, like the entirety of it. It's not like, oh, we're just going to keep like a few creatives and like 2 marketing people. It's like, no, DC just no longer has their own in-house collectible brand anymore. They're now going to be licensing out to people like McFarlane Toys, Mattel, Hasbro, because apparently, that's cheaper than doing it in-house because you're just basically, you're getting money for your property, but you don't have to do any of the manufacturing or design. You just say yes, no to the, what they present to you. So that one for me is really sad, just because again, it's the entirety of it. Obviously though, the thing I guess we're gonna, as we continue talking, the broader aspect of that is the comic books in general, right? Like letting go of a third of their editorial staff, some of like the big dog. We're not talking about like, a Superman group editor, we're talking about like people who oversee like everything. You know what I mean? Not just like one book, like people who oversee like all the Batman books, all the Superman books, all like the Justice League related books. So this is crazy. It's gonna change things in a big way. And the thing, before I be quiet and let you give your thoughts, I do want to say the thing that's really crazy about this is it's just 2 to 3 weeks before DC Fandom.
Yeah.
Like, what timing is? You would think. I mean, I don't know because if you wait till after, then it's also like, well, you just had this awesome thing, and then you're gonna just like, axe so many people and stuff. But it is still weird. So 2 weeks before, the timing of that's just really you have, because DC Fandom has been like, the hype has been like building and building. We talked about it, we keep talking about it pretty much every podcast, but Jim Lee recently just released a promo video of how we created the map for the DC Fandom event and all that stuff. And they're just pushing it out and they're promising all this cool announcements. And then 2 weeks before it, they're like, oh, we're going to stop printing as many titles as we are. We're letting go of half editorial. We're changing things up. We're going to be focusing more on, direct market, like places like Walmart and stuff like that, which is something I want to talk about in a bit because that's directly going to affect comic books. But just all these massive changes. And yeah, I'm bummed out, to say the least. DC Batman is what got me into comic books.
Right.
Like, I love Marvel. I love them both. But end of the day, without Batman, without DC, I probably wouldn't be here talking to the Variant Nation. You know what I mean? So this one hurts for me personally.
Yeah, I know that. I know you feel this one deep in your soul. Here's the thing for me. If you go back and you listen to some of our podcasts towards the beginning of the year, we had several where we specifically talked about DC. And one of the things that I kept reiterating over and over again is the corporate side and the trouble that DC was facing being owned by AT&T now. And the reason for that, and the reason that, for me, it kept boiling down to business and I kept going back to the money, is because in our time, we're dealing with massive amounts of corporate debt.
Right.
So we have a lot of companies like AT&T that are, taking huge steps. And this is before the pandemic started, okay? And all the lockdowns and everything and how that affected all these companies.
Oh yeah.
So AT&T was facing about $180 billion in debt that it was trying to shed, especially after the acquisition of Time Warner. They had already been in a pattern of making cuts, and it was very clear that they were moving in a direction of streamlining, and that they had their eyes on. And as far as the acquisition of Warner Brothers, especially, the Time Warner arm, that includes DC Entertainment. They were eyeballing that for just very specific uses, and it was becoming, so a lot of the things that we had been hearing and that were coming back to us, as well as other things that were coming out in the broader media, we were starting to see, and we talked about on several occasions, the smoke that was starting to really reveal itself as far as potential danger and trouble on the horizon for DC. Not because of their comic sales per se, not even because of the fact that physical comics has been slowly getting phased out. While it's still the dominant means of selling comics, we are there is no arguing things are moving more and more digital as time has gone on. So, but despite all of that, the real problem that they were facing was they were dealing with a new owner that did not see the usefulness in printing comics. They did not see the future, viability and profitability.
Which is so unfortunate.
It's incredibly unfortunate. But that is just the reality of it. And that was becoming more and more and more apparent, that they were really just looking to acquire these characters, acquire these properties so that they can exploit them on their new streaming divisions and in the theaters. And now fast forward to the situation we're in now, where now you've lumped on all of this additional economic pain and trouble that's come along with the pandemic and the lockdowns and the steps that we've taken to mitigate that. And it really feels very much like this was an inevitability, sadly. And it really does boil down to business, because you could kind of feel a lot of the desperation in some of the moves they were making earlier in the year, late last year and earlier this year. Even some of the things they had announced with like 5G and stuff last year, you were feeling like they were, and it was one of the things that we actively talked about here on the podcast, and that what I stressed is it felt very much like it felt like a division of a company that was given a certain amount of time to prove they can do something that's worth their while. You know what I'm saying? I've seen this many, many times when it comes to an acquisition of a larger company, of a smaller company by a much, much larger company. And you just have those corporate suits that come in, and they're like sledgehammers, man. And it very much feels that way. And when all this stuff went down with the pandemic and everything, you could tell that was like the death knell. They just was like, yeah, no.
For sure. Yeah. It was.
Because they, think about how much money they've been hemorrhaging just trying to keep things going, especially with the movie arms. Because again, and just to stress this point, it was not just DC that was handed a bunch of pink slips. Warner Brothers as a whole saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of layoffs. I believe it's over 900 layoffs total throughout Warner Brothers Entertainment.
So that means like 600 are from DC alone?
Correct. So you're looking at hundreds of, because you had the CFO, Warner Brothers CFO, Kim Williams is gone. The worldwide television distribution president, Jeff Schlesinger, and Ron Sanders. Major players.
But the majority's from DC Entertainment, though, which
huge.
You know what I was just thinking? I'm like, I think DC Fandom is going to be very telling. Like whatever they're leaning into most, like I want to see how much actual comic book news and information and unveils and teases is going to be released at Fandom, right? Because, all the big news that we're all geeking out for and expecting has really been on their movie side, like their TV side a little bit, but really the movie side. We're looking to get confirmation, on Keaton Batman being in the Flash movie. We're looking to get like a trailer for the Snyderverse Justice League cut. More information on just DC. Like it's all pretty much Shazam 2. Like it's all pretty much movie related. So I'm curious to see. Now there is like islands and maps that we see that is made for like this virtual experience. So I'm curious to see though how much like other presence like writers and artists will have. Like will Snyder be there? Will Johns be there? Capullo, Williamson, like where all these heavy hitters, in the DC universe right now be there announcing new things. You know what I mean? Like, or are we gonna get because the biggest event going on for DC right now is probably death metal, right? That's their big thing that Scott Snyder's overseeing. It's like tying in Perpetua, Dr. Manhattan, and all these events that have happened over the last several years. So you would imagine maybe we'll get some sort of tease for what's coming next. Because if you're going to do that at any time, you got to do it at DC Fandom, right? Because they just announced at New York Comic Con they're going to be doing something virtual. Because obviously we're not having that physical in Manhattan right now. Right. But I'm very curious. I'm super excited for all of the Black Adam movie news we're gonna get, the Matt Reeves Batman. Like, yes, give it to me all day long. But are we gonna get announcements for the heart and soul of what DC Comics is, the comic books? Because I was reading an article. I believe yesterday, actually. It wasn't an official article, but it was one of those things where it's like coming from sources within, saying that Warner Brothers is restructuring DC for a 2-year plan. So basically, what they have set up is going to take 2 years to come to its full realization. Where I mentioned it earlier, recently, it looks like they're going to be phasing out a bunch of their titles and be putting a lot of emphasis on all their best-selling stuff. Like the article I was reading was basically saying, if you're a Batman fan, fear not, because that's definitely not getting the axe, because that's the one thing that constantly sells for them. But on the flip side of that, they're like, we're just going to be getting Batman books. So like, it's Batman and like this Batman book, that Batman book, like all you're gonna have to read is pretty much like, you know, Batman books, which is ready a complaint now. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm a massive Batman fan, but I need my Flash books, I need my Super Sons books, I want, you know, all that diversity and, you know, the Green Lantern stuff and all that other fun stuff. I don't want just 5 Batman books a month and then just have like a Flash and Green Lantern title. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. One of the things, you know, I was reading is they're going to be focusing to direct market, but not like direct market in the sense of like, you know, brick and mortar comic book shops. Talking about, as we know, DC already has a contract with Walmart, which is like what, the largest retailer in the country or the world, in the world, right? Yeah, in the world. So they already have a contract with them. So it looks like they're looking to release a lot of their new titles through Walmart and make exclusive deals with them. I don't know, like the article didn't say, and I don't know how the logistics of that would work. Does that mean like comic book shops are not getting books? Is there just shops specifically for comic stores, and then Walmart has like exclusive rights to like the Batman title? Could you imagine that? A world where Walmart has the exclusive rights to the Batman title and Superman title. So let's say Batman, Superman, and Justice League, like they're 3 best-selling titles, right? And you could only get the new Batman book or big events like Death Metal through Walmart. You can't go to your local comic book shop. Can you imagine that? Like if they sign an exclusive deal like that?
I can.
Dude,
I can.
Oh man, that would
now.
suck, man. That would suck so hard. Because even being a collector, a big complaint is one, Walmart's Walmart. So you would think, you know, they would have like a plethora and a big ability, but it's not so, at least not now. Like it's hard to find the books when they do have their exclusive books that they've been getting for the last 2 years. And 2, they're usually damaged because they're not a collectible shop. So they're not going to like put them on the shelves and take care of them like a local comic book shop will. They're going to put them in that cardboard box, throw them next to all like the Pokemon cards and call it a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as a collector, that's a knife in the heart, man. If that's what's going to happen in the 2 years, that would really suck.
Yeah. I don't know, you know, who knows how long, you know, it'll take to shift if it does. The reason I say that, yes, I can see it is because of what's happening now in general, just across the business landscape. You're seeing small businesses getting absolutely crushed while the larger corporate empires are being bailed out and saved. And we're seeing, just like back in 2007, 2008, where we saw that big financial crisis back then, we saw a lot of consolidation in the business and financial world. Yeah. We're seeing the same exact thing now. And I think we're going to see that even ramp up here in the next year or so, where you're just going to see a lot of smaller businesses really, really struggling. And the ones who benefit from that are these massive multinational corporations that can survive and that really ultimately are favored by the powers that be, if we want to call them that. So with that consolidation, you know, if you have DC, you have Warner, and they're kind of seeing this trend and they want to make sure that they have their distribution system set up. You know, I can definitely see a situation where they say, okay, well, the local comic book shop is going away. We need to make sure that we have our end protected, and, you know, to whatever end, we're going to continue to publish and distribute physical, you know, comics and collectibles. Right. Now with DC Direct going away and, you know, entirely, you know, here in the next little while, you know, we don't know what the merchandising and collectibles side of DC is going to look like at all. We don't know what we're going to get, what we're going to be able to keep. How are they going to do it? I have to imagine with those kind of licenses, they're going to be doing something, but I based on the fact that they've eliminated the in-house version of DC Direct entirely, and they're just closing up shop, my guess is that they're just going to be licensing to outside toy companies, at which point, yeah, you're going to largely see those things end up in the larger box stores, which, you know, Target, Walmart, etc. It's
weird for stuff like that, like going back to like, you know, the toy end. I feel like that though lends itself better to retail. Like, don't get me wrong, I still liked, because, you know, and the Variant Nation probably knows, like, what's the one line of action figures / collectibles that I have every single version of and I collect everything released? BTAS, right? Yeah. Batman Animated Series. And that was DC Direct. They started doing it back in like 2012. So I've been collecting that line for what, 7 years now, and I have I have the Batcave, the Batwing, both versions of the Batmobile. Like, I have every figure from that line. That's you know, it's my childhood. So now that's, obviously with no DC Direct, that's not going to be a thing anymore. And who knows if like because they had solicitations throughout not only the end of the year, through like the second quarter of 2021, we were supposed to get, Batman the Animated Series styles of the Batman Who Laughs, Hush, Thomas Wayne Batman, like all these figures. And who knows, like I got to imagine, because I know they were sending out review samples for waves we were supposed to get like in a month or two, like of Armored Batman and Deathstroke. So we know those are already made, and there's probably a good amount of them sitting in a warehouse in China somewhere, right? Because that's what no, that's literally where they've been sending us from. Like when they sent us those statues, those were actually, because they're not in office yet because of the pandemic, so those were actually shipped directly from China. They're like not even coming from LA, so they're just sitting there. So since
what isn't shipped from China, Arris?
So since they're already made, and a good batch of them are sitting there in a warehouse, you're not going to just let that sit there. I would imagine you have to at least get that out, because you already spent the money on it. You might as well get it out. So I'm wondering, like, obviously the stuff that's already made, it's going to make its way to retail eventually. I'm just like, how is that rollout going to look? Will they just even hold on to it until and like sell that to another company to distribute it? Well, could we see like, that DC Direct line in a Walmart maybe, where they're like, look, we got like 70,000 of these, you guys want to buy it out and ship them to your stores and stuff like that. So I'm very, very curious with that. But also, sticking with the toy thing, comics and toys, that's my thing. McFarlane has been doing great. He's had the license for about, I don't know, almost 2 years now, year and a half. And we talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago, where he's doing a Thomas Wayne Batman, a Red Hood Batman. It was right around at San Diego Comic-Con. He made some massive reveals. We're getting some awesome figures. Collectors have been liking them. They're highly articulated. They look really, really good. Great. They're great for the adult collector. So I'm hoping my best case scenario with the toy side is they're like, hey, McFarlane, you already have a 5-year contract with us. Would you be willing to just take these and put them under your banner, or maybe just, continue, this line under McFarlane? It's just like pretty much it's you now. So, we do the same thing, but you're it says McFarlane Toys and not DC Direct anymore.
Right.
I don't know if that's something that's plausible, but
yes, that is in fact, that's my anticipation.
Okay.
Is that they will look to license out what they have, or if they put development money into just getting the initial sculpts done or whatever, but they haven't actually had them manufactured. You might even see a situation where they set up a partnership with an existing company, a toy company or some kind, to where they license that and they say, hey, look, this is already done. You manufacture it, you sell it, you distribute it or whatever, and then you pay us a cut, and the licensing fee. So my anticipation is, because that's not going to go away. That's just money sitting left on the table. They just don't want they don't want the overhead in-house. Right. So they're going to be looking to just license out and get into licensing deals on all of these things.
For me, that makes sense for toys. I don't know if that's like some weird bias or something, I just don't care as much about in that sense. But for toys, I feel like that makes more sense. You know what I mean? Like, sure, I would often buy a lot of the DC Direct stuff from comic shops and whatnot. But like, I'm a big Marvel Legends collector too. So I'm just used to like hunting for like the new Marvel Legends at Walmart, Target, stuff like that, or the new like, Lightning collection from Hasbro, the Power Ranger stuff I really like a lot. Right. So I'm that collector in me is used to getting this stuff from Walmart's, Targets, and Toys R Us's when it existed.
Sure.
Anyway,
the average collector is not going to notice much of a difference outside of
exactly.
You might not get it from your local comic shop.
Exactly, but a comic shop is just that. It's a comic shop. They just so happen to sell related things like collectibles and things in that nature. But first and foremost, it is a comic book store. So that one is really weird to me, because they also sell bags and boards, the supplies, the boxes, short boxes, long boxes, all this stuff that us collectors want, the variant covers and all that stuff. So going to a Walmart, I don't know. I mean, I guess if done right, maybe. I'm trying to be optimistic here, but I just don't want the comic book shop to go away. I know that's inevitable at this point. Yeah. It's just really a matter of time. Just like I always use this analogy, but just like how music, is pretty much fully digital now, and Spotify and iTunes or Apple Music, rules everything. We don't have CDs and all that stuff anymore. That's inevitably where comic books are gonna go, just because it's the natural course of things, it seems. But it's art, right? I feel like that's where the difference is. Where music and stuff is art, right? But it's not like art in the sense where like an artist drew it, it's literally a piece of physical artwork. You know what I mean? So that it would be weird to only have the option to have digital. Don't get me wrong, I love digital. Most of the comics I read because of what we do are digital, right? I absolutely love it. But I'm always going to need that option, and the collector in me is going to want to be like, well, I want that 1 in 25 variant cover to frame it in my office, or I just want this, Batman run in print because I love the artwork and I want to physically hold it. So I don't know. I just hope they find some kind of happy medium, because if they do end up making exclusive contracts with a Walmart, a Target, whatever massive retailer, that right there will be the nail in the coffin for comic book shops. And at that point, if that happens, I don't even know if shops like Torpedo Comics or like Midtown in just outside of Times Square in New York could survive. Maybe those guys can, just because those are like kind of tourist attractions and they sell so much more than just comics.
Right.
But I will say, we both know, we have inside connections, to a lot of people in the industry, that Midtown Comics was responsible for half of the orders of all these big publishers. Like, you're talking about they're responsible for half of the orders, the print orders for Marvel and DC and Image and all these guys. Yep. So, if print is looking a little weak, I don't know how they would maintain when that was like half of their business. You know what I mean?
It's tough, man. It really, I think that what we'll see, and we've talked about this again in the past, is that because again, it is inevitable. The retail stores, just in general, comic books aside, retail stores in general are moving in the direction of becoming an archaic thing of the past.
Like arcades.
Yeah. I mean, we are seeing brick and mortar, like right now, again, not to continue to go back to this, but right now we were already seeing retail, was on its way down. This whole pandemic situation has been like an uppercut to that situation, and has just exacerbated
a big kick in the butt to it.
Yeah, just put it on warp speed. And you're seeing, I think right now, just since I believe March, we have something like 40 different major retailers who have declared bankruptcy. And I mean, we're talking about huge companies. We're talking about like companies like JCPenney, Men's Warehouse, and so on. You know what I'm saying? J. Crew.
Pier 1, I think, was one of them as well.
Yeah, Pier 1. And they couldn't even get a buyer, dude. They're like going away. All 500 stores closed, gone. And they've been around as long as I've been alive.
And like you said, Toys R Us went out of business way before any of this even happened. And they were like the largest toy retailer in the country, maybe the world. I'm not sure if the world, but definitely the country. So that's crazy.
And a lot of that is because of the fact that of what we talked about and what I mentioned earlier. Toys R Us went away, and a lot of the reason that a lot of these companies dropped like flies is because they were already on the ropes. They had already racked up so much corporate debt, and they were already trying to figure out how to just keep going. And then this thing was just like, it was the death blow. So you have that situation, and when it's just expediting this overall trend that you're already seeing. We know for a fact that comic book stores, that a lot of them have not made it through the last few months.
No.
Many of them have, but many of them have not. And they've had to close their doors because they were already on the ropes. So with that continuing, that trend only going to accelerate, it's sad as it is, but the one thing I think that we might see, and this is my hope in the long run, okay? Because this isn't all going to happen at once. It's not what we're saying.
No.
It's not like tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and there's no comic book stores in America.
Right.
But over time, over the next few years, as we see this, the fewer and fewer of them remaining open, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see it kind of narrowed down to the strongest, the most creative, and those who figure out a niche, a way to make themselves like not just a comic book shop, but a novelty shop, to where they have everything you can think of in the world of geekdom, and they present it to their customer base in a really fun and engaging and interactive way. That was one of the things I think that killed Toys R Us, is they didn't adapt and become more interactive.
100%.
As our world was becoming more,
and then they try to come back and do that, making like interactive PlayStations.
Right. Yeah. So now I think the comic book shops that adapt and see what's happening and are really honest about it and say, look, we have to adapt or die here. And they start to make themselves more into a not interactive, fun atmosphere. We have one of our shops that we frequent here in the Dallas area called Madness Comics. Shout out Madness. Is they are a larger shop, But they're in an area where their overhead isn't going to be quite as much as it would be if they opened up a shop in, say, downtown Dallas, right? But also they have a big enough space where they can open up a portion of it for like gaming activities and all kinds of stuff that creates this.
Exactly what they do.
Yep. It creates this community interactive environment.
They also do a lot of signings there with artists and celebrities and stuff from pop culture. And actually, we know some of the people who work there. That's actually a massive chunk of their overhead and their income is by doing signings and like these little small like conventions where they'll have like 5 cast members from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or something, and then they'll do a massive signing that day. So
exactly right, and the demand for that isn't going to go away. Right, even as print comics, even if print comics were to stop tomorrow, the demand for those signatures, the demand to meet and to talk to those creators, to get signatures on, their work and stuff like that, none of that's going to go away. People are going to continue to collect comics. They're just going to become more valuable.
Which is another thing. It's kind of like, when Splash Mountain, when they're like, hey, we're gonna shut it down and we're gonna make it Princess and the Frog. More than anyone, a lot of those collectibles and stuff, all the prior Splash Mountain stuff, literally on Disney's website, sold out within like the hour of that announcement.
Within about 30 minutes, yeah.
And then literally you go to eBay, pops that were like $20-$30 on Disney's website are now $200. And I'm talking about sold listings. People were buying, not like someone's asking $200 for it. Someone bought it for $200. So the same thing's gonna kind of happen with this. Maybe even DC Direct. A lot of those older Batman the Animated Series figures. I just found this out recently. One of my friends told me, I have every single figure. And some of those figures, because of a lot of the way the shipments worked out and stuff, they only made like a wave of them, like Two-Face, Grey Ghost, and Scarecrow, to name a few. They just came out like November last year, $25 at the shop. They're going for like $100, $150 a pop right now just because they're not making them anymore.
Incredible.
So, I imagine with this announcement now with, now the DC Direct is gone, they were gonna go back and re-release some of the more, highly desired figures that people missed out on, 4 years ago.
Right.
But that's not gonna happen now. So, Batman from the first wave.
You could still see it if they do a partnership with, let's say, a Hasbro.
Oh yeah, sure. But that's still gonna be a very long time from now. You're talking about a few years maybe, depending how quick it goes. But anyway, those figures, how valuable things come. They're like, there were $20, $25 figures. They're now like over $100 for one. For something that was $25 once upon a time.
Incredible, man.
So comics, that will definitely be the case. But the crazy thing for me, though, is we literally talked about what I'm about to mention verbatim months ago about all this stuff. Is one of the things I read in that article. Again, I don't know how true this is. The person who wrote it said this was coming from sources inside DC, but take this with a grain of salt, was saying they will, obviously titles like Batman and stuff will be staying, so a lot of their more popular titles, but they will be dropping a lot of their monthly books, only, having a handful. And they will be focusing more on graphic novels and a lot more of their popular older stories, which is exactly what we were speculating months ago. So they'll just keep, pumping out like, a special super deluxe edition of The Killing Joke, The Dark Knight Returns, Justice League, The Tower of Babel, Blackest Night, like their most popular stories. And just that way, because that, us, the diehard, comic book community know of these stories, but still the mass people don't know. Like someone who just watches the Marvel movies probably hasn't read like the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. They just know it from the movie. You know what I mean? So same thing with DC. Like we get that Green Lantern show and people love it, but that doesn't mean they read Blackest Night or like Green Lantern Rebirth. You know what I mean? So this is prime time for them to be like, we have these awesome stories that people love, already done, written. We could just, promote them to this new audience, and that's like free money. It looks like we're making money off the same thing again. You know what I mean? Because now we have all these new interests. So, business-wise, fine, but I will also argue that a lot of the characters and stuff we've seen in movies and TV has been from stuff in recent years. Sure, we have a lot of stuff that from like years and decades ago, but like, Godspeed, he was in the CW Flash show. That character is like, what, 2-3 years old?
Yep.
You know what I mean? The Black Order in freaking Endgame and Infinity War. They are not that old either. No. That's within the last decade, So these aren't like a lot of the stuff, the storylines, even Civil War. Captain America Civil War, that is from the 2000s. Yeah. You know what I mean? That is not a storyline from the 60s, 70s, or 80s. So a lot of the stuff they've been using is still relatively new in terms of, comic books. So I think it would be a disservice to not continue to make a bunch of new content, because you never know when you're gonna make the next Joker or Batman type character. You know what I mean? You're basically like not letting the creators create and make that next great character or story arc. You know what I mean? Sure, that's not going to happen every single time, but but now we're going to get a lot less chances for that to happen if they dwindle back titles and stories. You know what I mean?
I think the writing on the wall here is now what was speculated, by us and many others a few months back. Well, I can't say many others. I'll say some others a few months back but now it's confirmed, is that the big order of the day here is cost cutting, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what they're looking to do. They're clearly not looking at this from the angle of like, well, what do the fans want? What's going to make the fans happy here? We want to make sure not to.
You mean they just want money? That's all they want?
Yeah.
Whoa.
What a shock. Yeah. So, I mean, if you really do have to look at it from that angle, so you have to say, okay, what is the most likely scenario here for them to still continue to generate, the content that is going to make them or maximize their profitability while simultaneously trimming every ounce of fat possible, and maybe then some. Right. Mm-hmm. Maybe even getting rid of some things that are profitable, but ultimately they just don't want to spend past a certain dollar amount in terms of budget. So my anticipation based on that reality is that we are likely going to see a dramatically reduced number of books and titles, characters that are getting books, etc. This situation that we have now where you have like 5 different Batman books and all of this kind of a thing. I think that is going to go away. You're going to be narrowed down to like 1 or 2, and you'll keep, like, the Flash will keep his title. Superman will keep a title. Wonder Woman will keep a title. It'll be that type of a thing. It'll get narrowed down to a very finely tuned selection of titles that are profitable and that maintain storylines that they want to maybe continue to feed the animation, the television, or the film side. And then the other part that I'm anticipating is that you are going to see an escalation of licensing characters out to other publishers like Dark Horse, like Boom, etc., to do either collaborative books or one-off storylines and things like that. So they're getting that licensing revenue, and it's not just sitting there, collecting dust. So you're speculating we could probably get another DC Marvel crossover here, because Disney would have to pay Warner Brothers for them licensing rights. It's very possible. It's very possible. I mean, there was some hints toward it, and people came out and denied it after the fact or whatever. But you just never know. But in this type of environment where they're looking to cut their overhead, cut their out-of-pocket in-house costs, while simultaneously, generate revenue off of the properties and the licenses that they own. That just seems like the most likely scenario, is that we are just going to see everything continue to get reduced down as tight to the chest as possible, as much licensed out as possible, so you can continue to generate funds off the licenses you own. And, you're not going to satisfy fans with that, because it's not going to be the same. No. Mm-mm. But you'll at least have something going where you can keep fans engaged and active, with the characters, and they don't just fade into the abyss entirely. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because you already have, like, for instance, the DC universe. I mean, that was a dead exercise the second the AT&T merger was finished. The second that was done, because they knew HBO Max was coming. Mm-hmm. They knew what they wanted to do there. The DC universe never stood a chance. I mean, it never stood a chance. And it explains now, looking at
why, like, nothing new is on there and they keep pulling stuff off.
Yeah, why it went the way that it went, and why the content that was on there, and they made this huge deal about it at launch, and then it was just like you barely heard anything about it.
The crazy thing to me is like how the exclusive DC Universe shows like Doom Patrol and Harley Quinn are now on HBO Max.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? So like they're still on the DC Universe app, but they're also on HBO Max when it was supposed to be an exclusive to that streaming service, to DC Universe.
Exactly right. And it wasn't like a long period of time either. It was almost instant.
Oh yeah, it was like 2-3 months after HBO Max came out. Like,
yeah,
it was almost instant.
Right.
Which is, and you're talking about the entirety of like seasons 1 and 2 of Harley Quinn, I believe, are on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, but
yeah.
you know, it just shows they don't, you know, they're not, you know, seeing DC Universe as a priority, because that means people who already have the HBO Max are not going to sign up for DC Universe to watch Harley Quinn because it's already on HBO Max.
Exactly. That was kind of my point of bringing up DC Universe, is that they're doing the exact same thing. They pretty much just they fired almost everybody, and they're just saying, okay, we have these properties here that we can exploit, that are popular, that people like. We're going to let the ones that people didn't like die, which is why I think we saw Swamp Thing get cut so quickly, right?
That one was weird to me. That one still perplexes me.
It was, but it clearly didn't generate enough buzz to make Warner happy.
Well, what they're saying, they said it was too expensive.
Yeah.
It was too expensive for what it was. Like, they couldn't justify it for how expensive it was to make with all the practical effects of Swamp Thing and stuff.
Yep. But that goes right in line with the idea of like they're trying to cut costs.
Stargirl is performing really well. Like, so, you know, whether you like it or hate it, it's doing really well overall for the service, and people are giving it good praise because it's just a fun show. Like, I came up recently not liking it, but it kind of has this weird charm where yes, it's cheesy and yes, it's kind of like campy and stuff, but that's part of its charm. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, it is. It's clearly geared to be a family superhero show. This isn't like trying to be freaking like, you know, Watchmen from Zack Snyder. It is clearly geared to like, for me to watch it with like my 8-year-old. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
It's like a show to watch with your daughter and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but that reason, the fact that one, it's clearly a lower budget show, and two, the fact that there is a niche audience for it, that, you know, it's been received well by fans to some degree, is the reason that we're seeing it stick around and getting shifted over to HBO Max. So I think that the primary point is they're taking DC Universe and they're doing the exact same thing.
Well, it's also on CW too, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? It was supposed to be exclusive yet again to DC Universe, but now CW has it. So that's like, these were all those like the smokes that were going, all this stuff with, like, when you say something's exclusive, like you won't see Stranger Things on freaking another streaming service or like HBO. You know what I mean?
No,
it's an exclusive. No. So these shows were supposed to be the same thing. Right. You know what I mean? But yet they're on other streaming platforms and even a full-blown TV network. So that was a clear sign from a while ago. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, man, it's just that maximize the economic output and maximize the input and minimize the output.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. And so they're doing with DC Universe the exact same thing I'm expecting them to do with DC Comics. On the comics division. Clearly with we kind of knew to some degree for a long time that, you know, DC Collectibles, you know, who went back to DC Direct, financially was not doing well for a long time. So it's sad, but it's not surprising at all to see them get, you know, closed down because, again, not because they had an awesome team over there and they did really cool collectibles. Yep. That's not the issue. The issue is, you know, they're owned by a company who's just if you're not making them money, if you're costing them money, you're gone. And so that's sad to see, and it's the same thing with DC Universe. That's just redundant.
They were around for 22 years.
Yep.
DC Direct was around. That's it, over 2 decades. They've been making statues, action figures, and other collectibles. And like they said, it was always cool being a DC fan because their tagline was straight from the source because they were DC.
Yeah.
So we got but like they're the company that kind of started giving us the artist specific, like, you know, versions of like action figures. Like you get a Batman action figure that looks just like Greg Capullo's Batman or looks just like Jay Lee's Superman. You know what I mean? So, and another thing, if you want to, you know, drive this point further, that probably isn't an accident, McFarlane Toys started doing artist-specific action figures. We're getting Sean Murphy's White Knight Batman. we're getting Jim Lee's Detective 1000 Batman. You know, like they're specifically designed to look just like the artist version of that character. So I don't think that's an accident either. There was probably some discussion behind the scenes like, look, this is going on.
Oh yeah.
You guys could probably take over doing the artist specific stuff because we don't know how much longer DC Direct is going to be around. So that's definitely not an accident at all. Because right now, even the new things they solicited, they're doing all the metal stuff. They're doing all the artist specific stuff from DC Metal. We're getting Red Death and all that stuff.
If we know anything about Todd McFarlane, it's that he is someone who smells. He smells opportunity.
For sure.
Right? And there is no doubt in my mind, because he also has deep, deep, deep ties and connections to inside the comic book industry, obviously.
Yep.
So I have no doubt that he was well in the know about what was going on over at DC, and he was absolutely preparing to take advantage of the void, the vacuum that was left by the inevitable closure of DC Direct.
He is definitely the future for their action figure department because he said at Toy Fair last year he's got a 5-year contract that is easily going to be extended now that DC Direct is no more. And his stuff is doing well. Us fans are really liking his stuff, so that is definitely. For the next decade or so, that will be the place to go for awesome DC action figures for sure.
It's fascinating. This is such a huge move because DC obviously being one of the big 2 comic book publishers, and arguably, and I would say, even empirically, it's the oldest. They've got the oldest characters, and it's the most loved and fan. I guess you could say. Just historically, it's the most fan-loved publisher. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, for a superhero, Superman, without him, they kind of revolutionized the American comic book industry.
Yeah. You got Superman and Batman under one roof, so good luck. But to see this happening to, one of the mainstays, one of the big, tent poles inside the comic book arena, the vacuum that's going to create is going to create some interesting opportunities for some of the other publishers and some other creators who were looking to start something new here in recent years. Because no matter how you slice it, this is going to lead to a massive slowdown for DC, which is sad because you were really seeing some cool opportunities open up for them.
Well, yeah, they're going to be into a reshaping, remodeling.
Yeah.
Again, I keep referring back to that article I read the other day, but if that is right, the next 2 years is going to be rebuilding for them. So they're just going to be stagnant, for let's say 2021 and 2022, because you really can't count the last 5 months of this year. Yep. So for the next 2 years,
just wrap up what they've been doing.
Yeah, they're definitely just letting things ride out and then resetting 2021, and then for the next 2 years they'll kind of just feeling out their new strategy and how things are going to work. But to kind of end on a more a happier note before as we start getting towards the end here, I will say in times like we've mentioned this before too, but in times like of this, where things seem like they're crappy and things are changing, we're like, no, but why? We want to have all our comic book shops. We want all those titles. It does light a fire under a lot of people's butts to seize this opportunity to make new and better things or come up with other ideas that might be awesome and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that could even work internally as well. Who even knows? This could, in times of when you're drowning, you have to try whatever you can to survive. And sometimes things hit and it's the next big thing. So who knows if the comic book industry, in being forced to either adapt or die, figures out some strategy or some new spin to stores that's the next thing, and now we see a resurgence of a sort. You know what I mean? And even for creators and just writers and artists and stuff, we know that's how Image came about, right? In the sense where it's we're not getting paid enough that we don't get appreciated. Why am I making cents to the dollar when these books are selling literally millions of copies and I'm the one who writes and draws it? You just ship it to a store. So that's how we got Image. And Jim Lee, Liefeld and all those, and McFarlane obviously. Left. So in times of desperation or times of need and want, we get some awesome stuff. So as gloomy as things may seem, and things kind of seem that way, especially as far as comic books go for DC. We might get some good stuff in the end, you know what I mean? Because DC, I do want to say, with all this, DC Comics isn't going away. We're never not going to have new Batman books or Flash. I don't want people to be like, what are you saying, guys? You're saying we're not going to be able to go to the store and buy a Justice League book? No, it's just going to be less.
Yes.
At least for now. You're not going to have, a Justice League book, a Justice League of America book, a Justice League Dark book, a Justice League International book, a Justice League Europe book. Like, you're just gonna probably have like 1 or 2 Justice League books, and not like 7 to choose from, you know? So
yeah, it takes me back to when Jim Lee did his spotlight panel back at C2E2. Do you remember?
Yes.
And he addressed some of the rumors, even some of them that we started back in, I think it was was it March or April?
It was around there. One of the two.
March. No, it was February. It was February. Anyway, so it reminds me of after he made his comments and everybody was saying, see, he took, he disproved everything and he shot everything down. And my thing was we talked about it that week. And I said, it's not what he said, it's what he didn't say, right? Mm-hmm. It's what he left out. He said, our intention is not to reboot. Things along those lines, the corporate speak, right? There was a ton of it in there. And it was, that was the clinchers. But one of the things that he said was, we've been around for 85 years and we want to be around for another 85.
Yep.
Right? And that part is true. DC will continue to be around for a very long time. Mm-hmm. The question was never whether or not DC was going to go away entirely. The question was, in what iteration was DC going to evolve as we move into the future? What is it going to look like next year, the year after that, and the year after that? And it very much is looking like, and this kind of takes us, again, to close up, it takes us back to the initial point that you made, which is that we've got Fandom coming up here on August 22nd, right? So this all was done just before Fandom. And it's like, well, man, you're announcing all this stuff. Now there's all this uncertainty surrounding DC, and we're headed into what was looking like this amazing and very fun event with DC Fandom. But when you look at the roster of people that they're promoting as the hosts and the guests of the fandom, the vast majority of them are tied to Hollywood, not comics.
Yeah, well, sure. It's like we were saying earlier, like movies and stuff is the majority of it. It seems
exactly. So that is clearly that, and again, this is what we've talked about for months now. That is clearly the future, not just for DC, but for Marvel as well. That they are going to be moving more and more in the direction of the comic books being purely creative sources for the television and the movie divisions of the companies. And DC, this to me, I think remains exciting because I do think that we are at the beginning of a DC emergence on the film side, on the actual filmmaking and storytelling side, on the live screen side, or the live action side rather. And I think that we are going to see Marvel come down a tick, and I think we're going to see DC continue to tick up, because you can tell they are putting attention into that. They're putting a lot of effort into getting that right. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot of stuff between the movies and what they're doing with HBO Max. I think we're going to start seeing DC do really well, but we are going to see their comics and their collectibles start to ramp down simultaneously.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely seems like, this is yet another thing we've talked about before. It definitely seems like this could be DC's time to shine on the movie side of things. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because it finally seems with Fandom and all these rumors and announcements that they are starting to step out of their own way and let the creators tell the stories they want to tell.
Exactly.
Obviously the Snyder Cut is the most clear, sign of that, where they're like, okay, all right, we messed up, I guess. We'll let you do what you wanted to do. And now there's heavy rumors of us also getting an Ayer cut. So it almost looks like they're trying to go back and fix the DCEU. Like, okay, we'll let you do the Suicide Squad the way you wanted to do it. So much so that there's even another rumor that we're supposed to get the Joel Schumacher cut of Batman Forever, where apparently it's been going all around the internet. There's like 40 minutes to an hour of that movie shot that we've never seen.
Which is incredible.
There's an hour, there's around 45 minutes of that movie that we haven't seen that just got cut out. So, I mean...
Can I tell you how excited I freaking am? If that comes to fruition, I will be front and center to watch that crap, to see.
No joke. Dude.
Because, dude, that is like iconic from my childhood. As insane as that movie is, I will absolutely be watching that.
I was just going to say that. Say what you will. Obviously, the Schumacher Batman films are corny, cheesy, bat nipples, horrible, not great, not great movies.
That's some cod piece you have there.
Not great movies, but I love them because that's when I'm 8-10 years old, I'm just like, Batman, Batman, bright colors, Batmobile. I just, you know, it's nostalgia, man. So I like those movies for that, and I still have fond memories of them. So I still, you know.
And I think those movies also had some of the most fun gadgets.
They do.
And like bat
They
gear.
do.
Some of them are ridiculous and over the top, but they're also just kind of fun at the same time.
Like the Bat credit card? Never leave home without it.
Let's not push it. Yeah, let's not push it.
Anyway, bringing this to a close, I think we could agree even though things are changing, we definitely have stuff to look forward to for DC. And
absolutely,
comics, though, you know, it may change the way we get them, and for a while we may not get as many of them. They're not going away indefinitely. It's just like everything. It's going to adapt and change, and we'll get used to it. And, you know, in another 20 years, it'll change again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, without a doubt. In the middle of the sadness of some of these moves and things like that, there is definitely some bright spots and things to look forward to. And in every disruptive time, you know, that creative destruction, new and exciting things always emerge, and I'm totally anticipating that to be the case here. So the bright spots will hopefully outshine the negatives in the end.
And if anything, that just means we'll have to be talking about a lot more comic book movie news on the channel.
I don't know that we'll have a problem with that.
But even that's the thing too with comics, right? Because there is so many backlog. Because it's crazy that we still haven't done like a history of Darkseid on the channel, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's just so many characters and stuff too that's already been made since like what, the 30s and 40s. The comics can stop being published in their entirety today, and we couldn't cover every single character.
There's no doubt. Yeah, you and I both, we could retire safely, and we would still not have finished even probably 2/3 of it. But yeah, I think one of the things that, you know, we're probably going to end up getting, and we have been focusing a lot more on here for the last couple of years, is actually talking about the specific individual storylines.
For sure. Yep.
For the first few years of Variant, we focused very heavily on the characters and character-driven episodes. And we've been doing a lot more focusing on the actual storylines. And more recently, we've been getting a lot of really great news stories. So we've been doing a lot of that. But there's just a ton of stories, like you said, in comic book history that we're going to tackle over the next few years. And there's no shortage there.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do Justice League Tower of Babel episode, because I mean, that's the freaking episode, the book where we see that Batman has a contingency plan to defeat the entire Justice League, and they're all like, "What? Yep. You were supposed to be our friend. You're thinking of ways to kill us?"
and you know because you've been dreading it, that I've been wanting to do the Blackest Night storyline.
Yes.
For literally like 2 years, and every time I bring it up, and I was like, "Yeah, we need to add that to the schedule." You're like, oh, it's
so good, but it's so massive, and like it's one of those stories that like you don't want to do it injustice, you know, like you want to do it right, and it's one of Jeff John's greatest stories. So well done.
Yeah, we're gonna have to start writing it. It'll take us like 2 months to write, and then you guys will get a really epic like 2-part.
I mean, I guess it would make sense to do it around the release of this new HBO Green Lantern show, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on when we're actually gonna get it. Hopefully, we get it before like 2030.
Any case, we could talk about the DC and all this stuff all day long.
Yeah, all good in the end,
for sure. But we want to know what you guys think. Let us know in the comment section down below on what is your theory, speculations, and just thoughts in general on all this massive DC shakeup, especially, again, 2 weeks before DC Fandom.
Absolutely.
But with all that said, guys, we will see you next time when we talk about all things comics.